So we try to focus here on what your social media says is trending, and that's exactly what we're going to do in this segment. Trending today, two interesting stories that are a little complex. First, the wildlife refuge in Oregon is still under control of the protesters, and social media is abound in opinions on this topic. Also, a story trending today out of North Korea says that the government there has successfully tested a hydrogen bomb. Here to give us the Cliff Notes version of these stories is a guy who has pretty much done it all. Cool guy. I met him in studio when he subbed in for Andrew Wilkow, right?
That's right.
Yes, and he's a Navy SEAL. He's an FBI special agent, or he was rather, Federal Air Marshal, Sirius XM radio talk show host, all around good guy, Jonathan Gilliam. My gosh, Jonathan, how old are you?
46, believe it or not.
That's a lot of life lived in a pretty small period of time there. Did you just spend a year doing everything and then just move on and decide, okay, now I think I'll become a media star?
I spent 5 years in the Navy, a year in the Air Marshals, and then I did some contracting and then went into the FBI. I was there for 8 years here in New York.
Okay, so I know this interview isn't supposed to be about you. We are going to get to some topics that are actually trending. Not that you're not trendy, but I'm just curious, like a guy like you who's lived all that life, what's your bucket list? Your big bucket list item.
Just to make, I tell you, my bucket list right now, as far as a career goes, is just making a difference for people, because one thing I definitely see is that we don't have enough politicians or leaders in this world that are making a real difference. And I want to try to make a difference with the experience I have and giving the knowledge to people. That's really, as far as the bucket list goes, that's all I'm really concentrating on right now.
That's a pretty noble goal. No wonder you've been so successful in your life so far. Jonathan, there are a group of protesters who've taken control of a government building in Oregon, and we've been talking about it already this week. But there seems to be no end to this. The public still has a hard time understanding who the protesters are and what exactly it is they want. Can you help shed a little light on this and make it make sense to all of us?
Well, I'll tell you something. This is a very interesting situation here, and I think what we're seeing is very similar to, I know people are going to go take a gasp when I say this, but the Black Lives Matter movement. What you have there are people that have a real concern. There's a bad relationship between cops and the inner city, and then you have activists that get involved with these things and they spin it into something that is almost out of control. And that's what you see here in Oregon. You have real farmers that have real concerns with these land grabs that are happening with their land by the government. They have a real concern. And what happens is you get these individuals that are almost like anarchists that are just itching for a fight with the government. And they get involved. And then what happens is it kind of spins out of control. Now, I know that there's a lot of these individuals that are not anarchists and they just are farmers and they just have taken a stand. I disagree with this stand. I think that there's smarter ways that they could have done this, but in the long run, if the government sits down and talks with them, that's going to be the most important thing out of all this, is if there's dialogue, because where there's no dialogue, there will eventually be conflict, and that's what we don't want to see.
Yeah, definitely not. Montel Williams, who's taken the conservative side of several issues over the last year, but he on this particular issue said that he thought the government should use deadly force on these people. That certainly isn't what he was saying regarding Black Lives Matter and some of the other Occupy Wall Street, some of those kinds of things. So do you have a read on what he's thinking in this?
Montel Williams is a moron, and I'll just tell you that right now. I'm ashamed. He graduated from the Naval Academy and was a naval officer, or a Marine, I think he was a Marine officer, and he just has blown it. I don't know what's happened with this guy, but for him to come out and say not too long ago, if Muslims were required to get an identification and some other stuff, he was going to have to pick up arms against the government. Now when you have people actually trying to defend their rights, he's saying that they should be killed. And I think Montel Williams has gone off the deep end. I don't think anybody should listen to anything he has to say anymore. And that's my professional opinion. That's not just me angry because people look up to him. I think he just completely has blown it on this issue.
All right, well, speaking of human rights violations, it really doesn't get much worse than the human rights violations taking place in North Korea. Now the North Korean government says they've successfully tested an H-bomb. What is their purpose in making this point? What is the message they're trying to get out to the rest of the world, and why?
You know, don't mess with me. I think that's maybe their message, but let me just tell you this. One thing I learned when I was in the FBI is that there are good guys and there are bad guys. And just like in the movies, you know, good guys wake up every day and say, I'm going to do this to improve the world. Bad guys wake up every day and they literally think, how can I get one over on the world today? Organized crime thinks that way. Drug dealers think that way. And so do dictators. And I just think that what we're seeing with North Korea is a perfect example of what we're going to see with Iran, because we didn't get ahead of that whole ordeal with this nuclear proliferation and there's a nuclear contract and agreement that we did with them. Mm-hmm. What you see here is if you don't listen, I know people don't want to go to war and things like that, but if you give a madman the tools to create a massive weapon, they will create that massive weapon. And some of these madmen will actually use it.
Yeah, and so we better keep a really close eye on that. We can't get a new president really too fast. Before we go, Jonathan, I want to ask you about your new YouTube series that you've started. Tell us about it very quickly.
So my new YouTube series is called The Experts. They can find it on my YouTube page by looking at Jonathan T. Gilliam, subscribing to that, and then looking at the first episode. I went through and did a 4-stage strategic war plan, which nobody is doing, to completely defeat fundamental Islam, which is this movement that we call terrorism, the global war on terror. It's actually fundamental Islam. And I put together a strategic war plan. It may not be the best, but at least it's showing you that a strategic war plan is possible. We have not seen that from the DOD, from any leader in the government, and anyone that's running for president right now.
All right, tell us where we can find it.
On YouTube, look up my name, Jonathan T. Gilliam. And there's a playlist called The Experts, and you just subscribe, and every time I release a new one, you'll be notified. All
right, Jonathan, thank you so much for being here on America Trends with us tonight. Coming up next, our rapid fire round, but first, a viral video. There have been some crazy winter weather around this country, even here in Southern California. I've never seen storms, rains. We had a tornado warning today. That was unbelievable. If you need snow removal, call in the squirrels. Oh. It's a big job for a little guy. My husband calls them tree rats. All right, you can find links to all those videos. You can watch the rest of that snow removal at our America Trends Twitter page. We want to hear from you too. Go to YouTubeAmerica.com. Join in our discussion. Vote right now in our daily poll question. Send us a video or a text. We'll do our best to